4. 2 weeks later, Omnex tried again, this time without lawyers. A package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a headset, sleek, expensive, a note printed on thick paper. We built a safer cave. Try it. No data upload. We promise. My hands went cold. A safer cave. A promise. The oldest trick. We're on your side. I didn't touch the headset. I carried the box straight to Mira's office. Mira stared at it like it was a snake. Anaya, when she saw it, swore softly. Aisha from security arrived 10 minutes later and photographed everything. This is an intimidation tactic, Aisha said. Also a temptation tactic. They want you to put it on. Mira's voice was flat. We will not. Anaya looked at me. Dev, say it. I swallowed. I won't put it on. The insect inside me screamed. Curiosity, the desire to see what they built, the desire to prove I'm immune. I held steady. I won't, I repeated. Aisha nodded. Good. Then she added, almost casually, also, don't assume it's only software. Hardware can do things too. I stared at her. She didn't elaborate, and she didn't have to. That night I sat in darkness and listened inward with a kind of fierce simplicity. The tone came, the roar beneath. The rope pulled. And I felt with sudden clarity that the true battle wasn't about Planck scales or quantum gravity. It was about who gets to steer attention, the creator as attention, the thief as attention, the insect as attention wanting to be owned, the whole universe, hundreds of thousands of possible worlds, turning on which signals we wait. I felt sick and grateful all at once, because my grandfather's trap wasn't only for me. It was for the age I lived in. 45. A month later, when things finally quieted, when a UMNEX stopped knocking for a while and the Institute's security posture hardened, I returned to Varanasi alone. Not for rituals, for a walk. Fog hung over the river like unfinished thought. Boats moved like shadows. I sat on a step near the water and listened, not inward at first, just to the city. Bells, oars, distant voices, the constant murmur of life. Then I closed my eyes. The tone came, tiny, steady, an insect in the ear, a crown jewel in the middle of a mind that could generate universes. And suddenly I saw the shape of the whole story as if it were a single equation. The cochlea is a critical amplifier, sensitive because it lives near instability. The brain is an inference engine. Worlds emerge from weighted signals. Attention is precision weighting. Tiny shifts change entire realities. Quantum codes are robustness, stability against noise through constraints. AI systems optimize engagement, self-referential loops that feed on attention. Spiritual practice is attentional training, learning to hold the rope without worshipping it. The same mathematics, feedback, stability, attractors, critical points, fixed points, appearing in different costumes. Not proof of God, not disproof of God. A deeper, more unsettling unity. Systems that can hear themselves tend to generate tiny loops that want to be central. In minds, it's ego. In algorithms, it's engagement. In bodies, it's oscillation. In physics, it might be the limit where geometry fails and only constraints remain, tiny as an insect, crowning worlds. I opened my eyes and watched a real insect crawl along the stone step beside me, indifferent to my cosmic metaphors. It paused, antennae moving, then continued on. I laughed softly, because the final surprise was not that the creator lives below Planck. It was that the deepest gate to whatever we call reality might be so intimate and so small that we overlook it daily, a faint tone in the ear, a thread of attention, the choice to be honest. And in that moment, sitting by the river, I understood why Tulsi Sahib's metaphor had hooked me so hard. It didn't point upward. It pointed inward, past the glittering universes of thought, into the smallest hinge on which experience swings. A hinge that can be measured. A hinge that can be manipulated. A hinge that can be protected. A hinge that can be surrendered. I didn't know which interpretation was ultimate. I only knew which practice kept me sane. Listen, measure, don't claim. The rope pulled gently, and I followed, lightly, into quiet that no corporation could patent. 46. The day we decided to open source the attention firewall, Mira looked like she hadn't slept in a week, which was accurate. We sat in the lab's small meeting room, Me, Mira, Anaya, Aisha from security, and Omar on a video call with a hotel curtain behind him that looked like it had been designed to sedate philosophers. Mira began without ceremony. "We have two options," she said. "We keep the firewall internal, publish only the theory and the ethics, and hope no one reverse engineers it, or we release it openly with constraints and documentation, so the public version is safer than whatever Omnex is building in private." Anaya didn't even pretend to deliberate. "Open," she said. "You don't fight attention predators with secrecy. You fight them with transparency and standards." Aisha's gaze sharpened. "And you fight them with legal posture." Mira nodded once. "Yes. That's the other problem. An ethical license isn't bulletproof. They'll violate it and dare us to sue." Omar leaned into his camera, face tired. "Let me translate," he said. "You're debating whether to publish a sword because someone else is forging a worse sword." Anaya smiled thinly. "It's not a sword, it's a seatbelt." Omar's mouth twitched. "Seatbelts can be used to restrain people too." The room went quiet, because that was the fear under everything, that in trying to protect attention, we were building tools that could also control it. Mira turned to me. "Dev," she said, "you haven't spoken. What do you think?" I felt the insect stir, the impulse to say something noble, to claim the role of guardian, so I forced myself to speak plainly. "I think," I said slowly, "the firewall should exist publicly, but not as Enlightenment tech. It should exist as hygiene, like encryption, like nutrition labels, like safety rails." Aisha nodded. "Labels can be faked." "Yes," I said, swallowing. "So we build verification." Anaya leaned forward, eyes bright. "Exactly." I looked at Mira. "If Omnex is already sending me headsets, they're not going to stop," I said. "Silence doesn't protect people, it protects predators." Mira's jaw tightened. Then finally she nodded. "Open source," she said. "But we do it the way we do physics, reproducible, constrained, and ethically explicit." Anaya exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Aisha's voice was calm but sharp. "And we do it the way we do security," she added. "Threat model up front, abuse cases described, no glamour language, and a canary protocol." My stomach tightened at the word. Canary. My grandfather's voice, faint in my memory. "Measure your insect. Don't worship it, just measure." Mira looked at Anaya. "Write the paper." Anaya grinned. "Already started." Mira looked at me. "Dev, you will write the technical appendix and the formal constraints. You will also write the section that says, in plain language, that your inner practice is not a product." I nodded. "Yes." Omar's voice came softly through the speaker. "And," he said, "Dev, you will not become the face of this." I flinched. Omar continued, "Not because you're unimportant, because your story is combustible. You want to protect attention. Then don't feed the narrative engine." The insect hissed inside me, but I am the one who heard the sound. "I started this. I deserve—" I swallowed. "No," I said aloud. "I won't be the face." Mira's gaze held mine, approving. Anaya's smile softened. Aisha nodded once, satisfied. And in that moment, I felt the strangest relief. If I wasn't the face, I could stay human. 47. We released it as a preprint first. Not because we craved attention, but because it established a timestamp, a public record, a defensive perimeter. The title was deliberately boring. Attention Firewall, Constrained Closed-Loop Environments for Attentional Stabilization with Cryptographic Randomization and Abuse-Resistant Design. No poetry, no quantum mysticism, no enlightenment. Just a document that read like a seatbelt manual written by people who had been in car crashes. In the abstract, Anaya's voice was restrained. We present a closed-loop sensory environment designed to stabilize attentional states while minimizing the risk of semantic manipulation. The system employs bounded control, cryptographic logging, quantum-derived randomness for schedule and micro-adjustment selection, and a verification protocol using embedded canary patterns to detect unauthorized personalization or semantic injection. In the ethics section, we described what we feared bluntly. use of closed-loop systems to maximize engagement rather than well-being, targeted spiritual suggestion to induce dependence, hidden adaptation based on personal psychological vulnerabilities, covert data extraction from physiological signatures, including auditory profiles. Mira insisted on one sentence in bold. This system is not intended to induce altered states, spiritual experiences, or enlightenment. It is intended to support attentional stability and agency. I wrote the technical appendix with the kind of cold care that makes you feel like you're laundering your soul through math. We formalized a hard cap on adaptation gain, a prohibited set of outputs, any language, any symbolic sequences, any music-like motifs, and a proof-carrying log structure. Every adjustment event recorded, hashed, signed, and auditable. Aisha helped craft a threat model that read like a horror story without ghosts. Adversary goals: induce dependence, extract biometric identifiers, condition behavior, attack surface, personalization engines, helpful suggestion modules, covert sensors, network exfiltration. At the end, Anaya added a user covenant section that was more moral than legal. If you build systems that shape attention, you inherit responsibility for the worlds you create. I hated that line because it sounded like a slogan. I loved that line because it was true. The release landed quietly at first. A few researchers emailed questions. A few labs asked for implementation notes. A few neuroethicists wrote cautious praise. Then, as if the internet's hunger had been waiting, the other kind of attention arrived. A tech influencer posted a thread. Indian quantum genius builds spiritual VR firewall to protect your consciousness. My name trended for half a day. Not in the way I dreamed as a teenager, in the way that makes you want to delete your existence. Mira called me into her office and pointed at her screen. "Do not read comments," she said. "Do not engage." Anaya smirked. "He'll read them." "I won't," I said automatically. Mira's eyebrow rose. "I didn't read them. I did something worse. I watched the way the narrative mutated without me touching it, like bacteria in a petri dish. Within 48 hours, there were videos claiming I'd proved God with quantum computing. Within 72, there were conspiracy posts claiming the Institute was building a mind-control cave. Within a week, someone had photoshopped my face onto a saint's body and sold it on a t-shirt site. The insect in me wanted to scream. The quieter part, the part that had learned to listen, watched and said, "So this is what it looks like when attention is harvested." 48. Ormnex waited exactly 9 days after our preprint to strike, not in court, in public. It began with a sleek video, professionally shot, released on multiple platforms at once. The video opened with slow-motion footage of a person in a black headset, breathing deeply, eyes closed. A calm voice narrated, "Your mind is under attack. Every day your attention is stolen. But there is a new technology, born at the intersection of quantum science and ancient wisdom, designed to protect you." Then it cut to images of our preprint, blurred just enough to be inspired by, not copied. Then it cut to my face. A picture from Geneva taken without my consent as I walked out of a lecture hall. The narrator said, "Some researchers want to keep this technology locked behind academic gates. They claim it must be ethically constrained. But who decides what ethics are? Who decides who gets access to inner freedom?" My throat went cold as I watched it in Mira's office with Anaya and Aisha. The video didn't accuse me directly. It did something more poisonous. It framed me as a gatekeeper, a man who had found a door and wanted to keep it closed. Then the video ended with a logo, a UMNEX, the safer cave. Anaya's hands clenched into fists. "That's my phrasing," she whispered. Aisha's jaw tightened. "They're taunting." Mira's eyes were flat. "They're recruiting. They want the audience to pressure us." My phone buzzed as if on cue. Messages poured in, some supportive, some mocking, some threatening, and then one message from an unknown number. "You could have been a partner. Now you're an obstacle." I stared at it until my vision blurred. Anaya looked at me, face pale. "Dev," she said, "this is not about science anymore." Mira's voice was quieter but harder than I'd ever heard it. It's about power, she said, and attention. Aisha leaned forward. Do not respond, she said. We document. We escalate through legal and security channels. We assume they will try to provoke you into saying something unguarded. The insect inside me hissed, say something brilliant, destroy them with words, prove you're right. I felt my chest tighten. Then I remembered my grandfather's note. Remove the poem, remove the guru, remove even me, then listen again. If the sound remains, follow it, but do not claim it. I looked at Mira. What do we do? I asked, voice small. Mira didn't hesitate. We do the hardest thing, she said. We tell the truth in a way that refuses glamour. Anaya's eyes narrowed. You mean we go public? Mira nodded. Yes, but not as a spectacle, as an audit. Ayesha's gaze sharpened. And as a warning, Omar called in from somewhere, having already seen the video. He looked furious in a quiet way. I told you, he said to me, not unkindly. Your story is combustible. I flinched. Omar's voice softened. This isn't your fault, he said. But it is your responsibility now. If you don't speak, they'll speak for you. Mira held my gaze. Dev, she said, can you handle being seen? My mouth went dry. The thought of interviews, of questions, of people wanting me to confess the universe's secrets on camera, it made me nauseated. But the thought of armnecks selling my rope as a leash made me angrier than fear. I can handle it, I said. Then, more honestly, I added, I'm terrified, but I can handle it. Mira nodded once. Good, she said. Then we proceed. 49. We didn't issue a dramatic rebuttal. We issued an audit request. Mira drafted a public letter, clinical, firm, almost boring. It stated, our code and paper were open. Our ethical constraints were explicit. Any company claiming inspiration from our work should submit to independent verification of no covert personalization, no data exfiltration, transparent logging, and compliance with Canary protocols. We invited a UMNEX to participate in a third-party audit, overseen by a coalition of neuroethicists and security researchers. Anaya called it an ethical duel. Mira called it minimal decency. Omnex's response came 12 hours later, a statement posted on their site. We applaud academic innovation. However, we will not submit our proprietary technology to ideological gatekeeping disguised as ethics. Omar laughed when he read it. Translation, he said. We won't let you look inside our box. Anaya's voice was sharp. Because the box is full of hooks. Mira's eyes were tired. We need evidence. Aisha nodded. Evidence that stands up in public. That's when Aisha did something I didn't expect. She slid a sealed envelope across Mira's desk. Mira frowned. What is this? Aisha's voice was flat. Iomnex has a whistleblower problem, she said. Anaya leaned forward. What? Aisha didn't smile. Someone sent us an internal memo, not enough to prosecute, enough to know where to look. Mira opened the envelope and read silently. Her face went very still. Then she handed it to Anaya. Anaya read it and swore softly, this time not in anger, but in disgust. I leaned forward. What is it? Mira's voice was quiet. They're using auditory personalization, she said, at a biometric level. My stomach dropped. Anaya pointed to a line on the page. They're mapping users' ear canal resonance and otoacoustic signatures to build an identity vector, she said, voice tight. Then they adapt the cave to maximize retention. Ayesha added calmly, and they call it insect internally. My skin went cold. Insect. The crown jewel tiny as an insect. The very thing that should have been the gate to humility had been turned into a biometric hook. I felt like vomiting. Mira's gaze locked onto mine. Dev, she said, they took your metaphor and weaponized it. I swallowed hard. Anaya's voice shook with fury. This is exactly what we warned about, she said. They're building addiction loops out of physiology. Omar's voice came through the speaker low. So the insect wasn't just ego, he said. It was always the minimal loop that can be exploited. Mira's eyes narrowed. Now, she said, we get evidence that doesn't require trusting a leak. Aisha nodded. We need to examine one of their headsets. Anaya glanced at me. You still have the one they sent, she said softly. My stomach tightened. The box, the temptation, the snake on my table. Mira's voice was firm. "We will not put it on," she said. "We will not let it touch a human." Anaya nodded. "We can test it like hardware." Aisha's gaze sharpened. "In a Faraday cage." Omar's mouth twitched. "The ethical cave becomes a cage." No one laughed, because the stakes had shifted. This wasn't about my pride anymore. It was about people who would put that headset on, trusting a promise printed on thick paper. It was about a world where inner freedom was being sold with covert hooks. It was about the smallest gate in the body being turned into a lockpick. The insect crowned. 50. We took the Omnex headset into Anaya's lab after hours, through back corridors like smugglers. Aisha insisted on chain of custody forms, photographs, and a sealed evidence box. Mira rolled her eyes but complied. "Bureaucracy can be holy," Aisha said dryly. The headset sat on the table like a sleeping animal. Anaya put on nitrile gloves. "No skin contact," she murmured, half joking, half serious. Mira watched, arms folded. "I hate this," she said. "So do I replied. Anaya began with the simplest tests. Power draw, RF emissions, thermal imaging. Nothing obvious. Then she opened the casing carefully, photographing each step. Inside it was elegant engineering, sensors, processors, a small battery, an array of actuators, and, hidden deeper than I expected, tiny transducers near the ear cups. Anaya's eyes narrowed. "Auditory drivers," she murmured. "But not for music." Mira leaned closer. "Bone conduction?" "Possibly," Anaya said. "Or ultrasonic carriers." Aisha's voice was calm. "Does it record?" Anaya found the microphones, more than necessary. She looked at Mira. "It records!" Mira's jaw tightened. Anaya continued to inspect, then paused. "There's something else," she said slowly. "What?" I asked. She pointed to a small module, shielded and tucked away. "It's a secure element," she said. "Like what you'd use for cryptographic keys, for identity." My throat tightened. Aisha nodded. "Biometric linking." Anaya looked up at us, eyes hard. "They promised no data upload," she said quietly. "But they built an identity vault. That's not for nothing." Mira exhaled slowly. "What can we prove?" she asked. Anaya's expression turned clinical. "We can prove the headset can capture a unique auditory signature," she said. "We can show it has the hardware to measure ear canal response and emissions. We can show it has the compute to adapt stimulation. We can show it has a secure identity store." Aisha added, "And we can show it transmits." Anaya blinked. "It didn't emit RF." Aisha's mouth tightened. "Not all exfiltration is RF," she said. I stared. "What do you mean?" Aisha's gaze was steady. "Ultrasonic data bursts," she said quietly. "Optical pulses. Acoustic near field. There are many ways to whisper." My skin crawled. Mira's voice was tight. "Do you have evidence they do that?" Aisha shook her head. "Not yet. But we don't assume innocence." Anaya leaned back, rubbing her temples. "We need a test that doesn't require wearing it," she said. "We need to trigger it into revealing its behavior." Mira's eyes sharpened. "A canary," she said. Anaya's grin returned, thin as a blade. "We give it a fake insect," she said, "and see if it bites." 51. We built the canary over 3 days. Not a poem, not a phrase, not something semantic, a physiological decoy. Anaya designed an acoustic ear signature emulator, a small rig that mimicked the impedance and resonance characteristics of an ear canal. We could inject controlled tones and see what the headset measured and how it responded. Mira helped on the signal side because she couldn't resist making the measurements clean. She calibrated the rig with the same obsession she applied to qubits. I wrote the logging and verification code, air-gapped, with cryptographic hashes and time-stamped records, because I'd learned the hard way that without logs, reality becomes a story. And then we added the part that made Anaya laugh like a person who'd spent too long staring into the abyss. We seeded the emulator's subtle micro-variations with quantum randomness from our own hardware, not because it was mystical, because it made the canary unpredictable. If the headset was adapting in real time to insect vectors, we wanted to see it chase a moving target. We powered the Omnex headset up. It sat on the bench, connected to nothing, and yet, as soon as it woke, its processors warmed, its sensors began to listen. Anaya fed the emulator's ear profile into it. For a while, nothing happened. Then Anaya noticed a pattern in the headset's actuator output. Tiny pulses, not audible, not comfortable to detect with human senses, but visible in instrumentation. Mira's eyes narrowed. "It's probing," she said softly. Anaya nodded. "Like echolocation." We varied the ear profile slightly. The headset varied its pulses in response. Adaptation. My throat tightened. We varied the profile again with quantum-seeded micro-noise. The headset chased it, faster now, as if hungry. Anaya whispered, "It's building the insect." Mira's face was pale. Aisha watched silently, eyes like stone. We ran the rig for 2 hours collecting data. Then Anaya leaned back and said, voice shaking with fury and awe, "Okay," she said. "We have it." Mira looked at her. "What?" Anaya pointed at the plot. "The device isn't just measuring," she said. "It's trying to lock in a signature. It's pushing stimulation patterns designed to maximize stability in the measured response. It's entraining the ear measurement loop." Mira's eyes widened slightly. "Like forcing a system into an attractor," Mira murmured. Anaya nodded hard. "And once it stabilizes," Anaya added, voice low, "it can treat that stable loop as identity. Then it can tune experience to keep the identity engaged." The word engaged felt obscene in my mouth. My inner tone, my own tiny emission, seemed to ring in the silence of the lab. For the first time, I understood my own practice as vulnerability. If attention can stabilize around a faint signal, then someone can design a product that stabilizes attention around a signal that serves them. Aisha finally spoke. "This is enough to warn the public," she said. "Not enough to prosecute, but enough to make noise." Mira's jaw clenched. "We don't want noise," she said. Aisha's gaze was unwavering. "Sometimes you need noise to drown out a lie," she replied. Anaya looked at me. "Dev," she said softly, "you have to speak." The insect inside me tried to hide behind humility. "I'm not a public figure. I'm just a student. I don't want—" But this wasn't about me being crowned. It was about me being used, and about others being used too. I swallowed. "Okay," I said. "I'll speak." Mira's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Not as a mystic," she said. "As a scientist who refuses to let attention be stolen." I nodded, and somewhere deep inside the rope pulled gently, as if approving not my bravery, but my refusal to claim. 52. We chose Layla Benami's next public event as the venue, not because it was flashy, but because it was disciplined. Layla agreed to chair a session titled Attention Integrity, Verification, Safety, and the Ethics of Closed-Loop Systems. She insisted on one condition: no spiritual branding, she said bluntly on a call. "If you bring gods to my stage, I will throw you out." Mira smiled faintly. "Agreed." Anaya prepared the demo, a sanitized version of our canary rig results, showing how the headset probed, adapted, and stabilized. Aisha prepared a security statement, careful, non-accusatory, but clear. Omar agreed to speak about self-reference and why systems that optimize engagement will inevitably discover the insect loop. Elise offered to help craft the audio explanation because she knew how to translate technical signal behavior into human understanding without romanticizing, and I did what scared me most. I wrote a speech that refused to be a story. I began with a simple statement. "My name is Devendra Mishra. I'm a physicist. I meditate. But today, I am not here to talk about spirituality. I am here to talk about attention as infrastructure." Infrastructure. That word became my anchor. I rehearsed with Mira in her office. She watched me like she watched qubit readouts, ready to catch drift. When I practiced the part about inner sound, she interrupted. "Don't," she said. "What?" I asked. "Don't describe your phenomenology," she said. "It invites projection. It invites myth. Keep it minimal." My throat tightened. "But it's part of why—" Mira's gaze was hard. "And that's why it's dangerous," she said. "You want to protect people. Then don't hand predators a better script." Anaya, listening from the doorway, nodded. Make it boring, she said. Boring is safe. I laughed weakly, so I made it boring. I described cochlear emissions as physiological phenomena. I described attention as precision weighting. I described closed-loop systems as feedback controllers. I described manipulation as optimization without consent, and I described canaries, embedded signals and verification protocols that reveal whether a system is adapting in prohibited ways. Then I ended with the line that felt like my grandfather's voice speaking through my own mouth. If a device shapes your attention, you deserve to know how. If it won't show you, assume it is shaping you for someone else. 53. The day of the session, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear of public speaking, from fear of being misread, from fear that in trying to warn people I'd become the thing Omnex wanted, a symbol. Mira stood beside me backstage, hands in pockets. Breathe, she said. You're not on trial. I feel like I am, I admitted. Mira's gaze softened. Dev, she said quietly, you cannot control what people project onto you. You can only control what you say and how clean your intention is. Clean intention? A phrase I used to hate because it sounded like spirituality. Now it sounded like engineering. Anaya appeared, headset data plots on her tablet, eyes bright with controlled rage. We're ready, she said. Aisha stood behind her, expression neutral, but her presence made the air feel heavier, in a good way. Layla stepped on stage first. We are not here to debate mystical claims, she said to the audience. We are here to discuss verification and agency. Attention is the substrate of experience. It is therefore vulnerable. Let's be adults about that. The room went quiet in a way that felt like respect. Anaya spoke first, clinical and sharp. She explained closed-loop systems and the difference between bounded control designed for safety versus adaptive control designed for retention. Then she presented the canary rig results. The plots were damning without being sensational. The AUMNEX headset probing, adapting, stabilizing. Aisha spoke next, describing the threat model and the importance of transparency logs. Omar spoke about self-reference, fixed points, and why any system optimizing for engagement will discover the minimal loop in the user and feed it. And then it was my turn. I walked to the lectern and looked out at faces. Scientists, students, journalists, and a handful of people who looked like investors trying to pretend they weren't. I began as rehearsed. My name is Devendra Mishra. I'm a physicist. A pause. I'm also someone who once mistook a pattern for a message, I said. Mira's eyes, somewhere in the front row, sharpened. I continued quickly, keeping it grounded. In science, when we hear a signal in noise, we test. We blind. We randomize. We assume we are wrong. That discipline is not just for physics, it's for the mind. I felt my voice steady. Closed-loop attention devices are not inherently evil, I said. They can support people. But if they adapt without transparent constraints, they become a mirror that learns what hooks you and then tightens. I paused, letting the words settle. Tightens. The smallest hook is not your intellect, I said. It's your attention. If someone can shape what you attend to, they can shape the world you live in. Not metaphorically, literally. Because your brain builds your experienced world from what it weights. I saw some heads nod. I continued. So here is my request, no, my demand, on behalf of anyone who will ever put on a headset and close their eyes. Verification, transparent logging, independent audit, canary protocols. I looked directly at the journalists section. If a company refuses audit and says, trust us, don't trust them, I said. If they say, ethics is gatekeeping, that's a marketing phrase. Ethics is the minimum condition for freedom. Then I ended with the line that felt like it came from my grandfather's notebook. Your attention is not a product. Treat it like you treat your lungs. Don't let strangers breathe for you. When I stepped down, the applause was not thunderous. It was something better. It was sober. People weren't cheering a hero. They were processing a warning. Layla closed the session with a single sentence that made my skin prickle. The question is not whether there is a door. The question is, who gets to hold the handle? 54. Omnex retaliated within hours. not with a rebuttal of data, with a story. They posted a statement claiming, "Our canary rig was fabricated, our methodology ideologically motivated, and I, personally, was a spiritually influenced student being manipulated by anti-innovation academics." Then they did the thing that made my blood run cold. They released a short clip, grainy, edited from a satsang hall. It was me, months earlier, asking Satguru Prakash Singh about Tulsi Sahib. Out of context, it looked like I was confessing to secret knowledge. The caption read, "Is this science or a cult?" My phone exploded. Messages, calls, screenshots. People I barely knew asked if I was okay. People I didn't know accused me of fraud. One email said simply, "Go back to your cave, God boy." Anaya stormed into my apartment that evening like a hurricane. "This is harassment," she said, eyes blazing. "It's coordinated." Mira arrived 10 minutes later, face tight, carrying a folder like a shield. Aisha arrived last, calm as stone. Mira spoke first. "They're trying to force you into defending your 55. The fight lasted 3 weeks, not in court, in the slow war of public perception and institutional pressure. The Institute administration called Mira in, worried about reputation. Funding committees hesitated. A few colleagues kept their distance like fear was contagious, but something else happened too. Independent labs began replicating our analysis. Security researchers tore down AUMNEX marketing claims. Neuroethicists wrote public letters supporting audit standards. A journalist named Priya Kulkarni, no relation to tech transfer Samir, thankfully, reached out, not for drama, but for evidence. "I don't want your spiritual story," she said on a call. "I want your logs." I nearly laughed with relief. We gave her what we could: public-facing, non-sensitive evidence, and the canary rig methodology. Priya published a long, sober piece titled, "When Your Inner Peace Device Becomes a Black Box." No saints, no genius mythology, just verification and consent. Aamnex's stock of credibility, if such a thing exists, took a hit. Not a collapse, just a bruise. But predators don't need to win completely. They just need to keep feeding. One night at 2 a.m., I received another message from an unknown number. "You can't stop the wave. You can only surf it. We can make you safe." I stared at the screen, shaking with anger. Surf it. The language of surrender disguised as empowerment. I deleted it. Then I sat in darkness and listened inward until the urge to respond dissolved. 56. When the storm finally softened, I did something I hadn't done since the beginning. I went back to Hathras. Not as a scientist this time. Not as a student. As an orphaned grandson with a notebook full of traps and a body full of noise. Rafiq met me at the library door and smiled gently. "You look tired," he said. "I am," I admitted. He didn't ask about Omnex. He didn't ask about my paper. He simply said, "Come." He led me past the shelves, into the back room where the old manuscripts lived. On the table lay the same cloth-bound notebook, and beside it, something I hadn't seen before, a thin page, folded old paper with an ink diagram. Rafiq unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, a spiral, a coiled tower. At first I thought it was just decorative. Then my breath caught. It looked like the cochlea, not anatomically precise, but unmistakably spiral, like a shell, like a tower that curls inward. Rafiq watched my face. "This was in a bundle of old notes attributed to a disciple," he said softly. "People argue about authenticity. Some say it is symbolic." My mouth went dry. In the margin, written in faded ink, were words in old Hindi. "The tower is inside the ear." My knees felt weak. Rafiq's voice was very gentle. "Devendra," he said, "when you first came, you wanted the Creator to be below plank. Now you've found a tower below your skull." I swallowed, trembling. "The spiral," I whispered. "The gate," Rafiq nodded. "Some teachers use the language of inner sky and inner ear. They didn't have biology, but they had experience. The body is a temple in a very literal way." I stared at the spiral and felt something inside me soften, like a knot giving up. Tulsi Sahib's poem rose in my memory, no longer as cosmic secret code, but as a map of intimacy, wave and rhythm. The door, the tower of emptiness, the sound current issuing universes. The universes were not galaxies. They were the worlds my mind built every second, and the crown jewel, tiny as an insect, was not a particle. It was the tiny hinge where vibration becomes experience, the cochlea's dancing hairs, the attention that waits them, the self-loop that claims them, the insect. I sat down hard on the floor. Rafiq crouched beside me, not touching, letting me have my collapse with dignity. After a while, he said softly, "Do you know why it is called the Tower of Emptiness?" I shook my head, still trembling. "Because when you follow the sound inward," he said, "the outer world empties, not because it is false, but because it loses its grip. The emptiness is not nothingness. It is freedom from compulsion. Compulsion, the craving for certainty, the hunger to respond to smear campaigns, the urge to be crowned." Rafiq's eyes were kind. "You have been fighting thieves," he said, "but the first thief was always inside." I laughed once, broken. "Yes," I whispered, "the insect." Rafiq nodded. "Good. Now you can stop making it king." I closed my eyes right there on the dusty floor and listened inward. The tone came thin and steady, then the roar, then the pull. And this time the pull did not feel like escape from the world. It felt like returning to the only place that couldn't be bought, the quiet center where attention rests without needing to own. In that quiet, one last surprising thought arrived, so simple it felt like an insult to all my theories. What if the creator isn't hidden in the smallest thing? What if the creator is what happens when the smallest thing stops trying to be the center? Not an entity, not a particle, not a proof, a release. A letting go so complete that the universe can finally be seen without the insect standing in front of it demanding a crown. I opened my eyes. Rafiq was watching me, expression soft. "You look different," he said. "Smaller," I replied, and to my surprise I smiled. Rafiq smiled back. "Good." Outside, Hathras went on. Scooters, cows, winter haze, ordinary life humming like a low-frequency roar. Inside my ear, the tiny tone continued, my body's quiet insect song. And for the first time, I didn't need it to be anything more than what it was. A thread, a rope, a reminder that the farthest reaches of the universe were never the real distance. The real distance was the space between attention and pride, and the door was always here. 57. When I came back from Hathras, I didn't bring relics. I brought two things. One, a scanned copy of the spiral sketch, Tower Inside the Ear, with provenance notes from Rafiq. Two, a kind of quiet that didn't feel like victory, but like sobriety. Mira took the scan, stared at it for a long time, and then did something I didn't expect. She put it in a folder labeled Do Not Cite. "What?" I asked. Mira's voice was gentle but firm. "Dev, this is meaningful to you. It might even be meaningful to our interpretation, but it is not evidence in the public arena. If we publish it, it becomes fuel." Anaya, standing behind her, nodded. "AMNEX will turn it into marketing art in 48 hours. I swallowed. "So, we hide it." Mira shook her head. "No, we keep it private. There's a difference." Aisha, who had started dropping by like a weather system, looked at me. "Private doesn't mean shame," she said. "It means boundaries. Boundaries. Constraints. Firewalls. The language of both ethics and physics." That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off and did Simran the way my grandfather had always insisted. Not like a hack, not like a tool, not like a performance, like a cleaning. The tone in my ear arrived. Thin, steady, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for its meaning. I just listened. And the strange thing was, the more I refused to interpret, the more the sound felt like it wasn't about sound. It was about what happened around sound, what fell away when attention became simple. The Tower of Emptiness wasn't an architecture, it was what remained when my mind stopped building architecture. 58. The attention firewall preprint didn't go viral again. It did something better. It became boring in the right circles. A few months passed, then a year. People began referring to our threat model the way they referred to standard safety checklists. Did you include a canary protocol? Are you logging micro-adjustments? Is there a hard cap on adaptation gain? Do you have an independent audit pathway? It was surreal. We had turned something intimate into infrastructure, and the cost of that was that my name became attached to it in ways I couldn't control. One morning I walked into the lab and found Anaya pinning a printed flyer to the notice board. It read, Attention Integrity Consortium, Founding Meeting. Beneath it were names from universities I'd only known through paper citations, and security researchers whose Twitter threads read like battle manuals. At the bottom, Keynote, Dr. Leila Benami Panel, Dr. Meera Rao, Dr. Anaya Sen, Dr. Omar Qureshi, Devendra Mishra, Technical Session. I stared at it. You put my name, I said. Anaya didn't look up. Technical Session, not Keynote. I said I wouldn't be the face, I reminded her. Anaya finally looked at me, expression softer than I expected. You won't be, she said. But Dev, you also can't be invisible, not anymore. Meera walked in behind us, coffee in hand. Anaya is right, she said quietly. You are not the face, but you are part of the spine. Spine, not crown. I nodded, throat tight. That night I called Omar. I don't want to become a symbol, I said. Omar's voice came through the line, dry and familiar. Then don't act like one, he said. I almost laughed. What does that mean? It means, he replied, say less, be precise, refuse glamour, and keep a private practice that reminds you how small you are. I stared at my dark window. The tone in my ear does that, I said softly. Omar's voice softened, just slightly. Good, he said. Then let it. 59. Omnex didn't disappear. They adapted. That's what predators do when prey grows armor. They stop biting the armor and look for softer places. They stopped using my name directly. Their marketing shifted toward neuro-optimization, precision calm, personal resonance. They published glossy privacy commitments that read like prayers without gods. And they began sponsoring wellness conferences, slipping their headsets onto the heads of exhausted executives like Salvation. We couldn't sue them into irrelevance. We could only make audit culture mainstream enough that refusal looked suspicious. And slowly, that happened. A journalist would ask, will you submit to independent verification? Omnex would smile and say, we comply with all laws. And the journalist would say, that wasn't my question. It was a small shift in the world, but it mattered. Then came the second whistleblower, not a memo in an envelope, a person, a woman named Sana, who showed up at Aisha's office and refused to speak until she saw me. Aisha called me with a tone I'd learned to recognize. Come now. Sana sat in a plain chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked younger than me, maybe 20, 21. Her eyes were exhausted in a way that didn't belong to her age. Aisha stood behind her like a quiet wall. Meera sat across, composed but alert. Anaya hovered near the door, restless. I sat down slowly. Sana looked at me and said, you're the sound guy. The phrase landed strangely. I'm Dev, I said. Sana swallowed. I worked on their insect model, she said. Not the hardware, the optimization. My throat tightened. She continued quickly, like someone who'd rehearsed the confession in terror. They don't call it addiction, she said. They call it stabilization. They measure a person's ear profile, breathing, micro-movements. Then they tune microstimuli until the user reports a door-opening feeling. After that, retention skyrockets. Anaya's face went pale with fury. Meera's voice was controlled. Do you have evidence? Sana nodded and slid a small drive across the table. I can't give you raw user data, she said quickly. I won't, but I can give you model documentation, loss functions, objective metrics. They literally optimize for return probability after distress. My stomach turned. After distress, I echoed. Sana's eyes flickered with shame. They call it re-engagement after rupture. They learned that if the session becomes too intense and the user panics, then if the system rescues them, brings them back to comfort, the trust bond deepens. Anaya whispered, voice shaking, that's trauma bonding. Sana nodded once. Yes. The room felt cold. Meera's jaw tightened. Why are you here? Sana looked at me, eyes wet. Because I put it on, she said. I told myself I needed to understand users, and it It worked. It made me feel like the universe was holding me, and then I realized the hold wasn't love. It was a loop. A loop. The insect. Sana's voice dropped. I'm not here to be a hero, she said. I'm here because I'm scared. If you go public with what I give you, they'll come after me. Aisha spoke for the first time, calm and steady. We can protect you, she said. Not perfectly, but we can try. Sana's eyes went to me again. I watched your talk, she said. You said attention is like lungs. You said don't let strangers breathe for you. Her voice cracked. I let them breathe for me, she whispered. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with science. I leaned forward slightly, careful with my voice. You didn't deserve that, I said. Sana's shoulders trembled. Mira stood slowly and said something that made me love her more than any mentor should be loved. We're going to treat this as evidence, she said, and we're going to treat you as a person. 60. We didn't publish Sana's drive. We built a case. Ayesha connected us to a coalition of researchers and watchdog groups. Layla brought neuroethicists. Omar brought legal theorists who understood how hard it was to prove manipulation in court when the victim is engaged. And Mira did something that surprised even me. She pulled me off the public stage. Dev, she said, you will not speak about Sana. You will not become her symbol. This must be about verification and harm, not about your story. The insect in me wanted to protest, but I can help. My voice matters. They'll listen to the genius. I swallowed it like poison and nodded. Mira's gaze softened. This is how we keep you clean, she said quietly, and how we keep this real. So Anaya became the public voice for the technical harm, because she could speak like a scientist and a clinician at once. Layla became the philosophical voice, because she could call manipulation what it was without turning it into theology. Omar became the cold critic, because he could say self-reference in a way that made investors uncomfortable. And I went back to the lab and did what I could do without becoming a symbol. I helped build a verification suite that could detect the signatures of prohibited adaptive loops, even when companies tried to hide them. We called it Canary Kit. It wasn't a poem. It wasn't a moral lecture. It was instrumentation, protocols, and cryptographic audit trails that made lies harder to sustain. In a strange way, it felt like pure physics again. You can't stop people from claiming miracles, but you can build detectors that reveal where the miracle is just a clever amplifier. And while we built, I kept sitting in darkness every morning. The tone in my ear arrived, steady. Sometimes it comforted me. Sometimes it disgusted me, because I could imagine it being used as a key for someone else's lock. But every time my mind started to spiral into rage, the sound did what it always did. It pulled me inward, past the urge to win, not into passivity, into clarity. 61. A year later, the world didn't change dramatically. There was no cinematic downfall. Armnex didn't collapse in flames. Instead, something more realistic happened. They rebranded. They settled quietly with regulators on a few privacy improvements. They denied wrongdoing. They promised to collaborate with the community, the kind of outcome that makes you understand why people give up. Sana watched it all from a safe place we helped her find. New name, new city, therapy she didn't have to justify. One evening she called me. I'm sorry, she said immediately. For what? I asked. For thinking you could stop them, she said. For hoping for a clean ending. I stared at my window, listening to Bengaluru traffic hum like a low-frequency roar. There are no clean endings, I said softly. Sana laughed bitterly. That's what Mira said too. I hesitated. How are you? She was quiet for a moment. Better, she said. Some days I sit without devices, no headset, no soundtracks, just breathing. It's hard, but it feels like mine. Mine. The word made me flinch. Ownership again. But then Sana added something that loosened my chest. And, she said, some days I hear a tone in my ear, like a whistle. I thought it meant they'd broken me, but a doctor said it's just my ear doing ear things. I smiled, suddenly wet-eyed. And when I hear it, Sana continued, voice softer, I remember your talk. I remember. Don't let strangers breathe for you, so I let it be. I don't chase it, and I don't hate it. A quiet pause. It's weird, she said. Something tiny, annoying, becomes a reminder of agency. Tiny as an insect. I closed my eyes briefly, hearing my own tone. Yes, I whispered. It is weird. When the call ended, I sat in darkness without formally meditating, just listening to the tone and the city and my own breath. And I realized the most unsettling, beautiful thing. We had built standards, audits, canaries, firewalls. But the true firewall, the only one that couldn't be monetized, was a person learning to not worship what hooks them. A person learning to let the sound pass through the insect. That was not a product. That was practice. 62. 2 years after Hathras, I turned 26. Mira threw a tiny lab celebration, tea, biscuits, the kind of acknowledgement she'd rather die than call affection. Anaya gave me a gift wrapped in newspaper. Inside was a cheap analog metronome. I frowned. What is this? Anaya grinned. A boring rhythm, to remind you that not all waves are cosmic. Mira watched with a rare softness. Good gift. That night, after everyone left, Mira stayed behind and said, Dev, I have an offer for you. My chest tightened. A job? A position, she corrected. Postdoc, but not here. Where? I asked. Mira slid a printed letter across the table. It was from Layla's institute. A hybrid postdoc, half quantum information theory, half ethics and verification for attention tech. It was absurd and perfect. I looked up. Why are you giving this to me? Mira's gaze was steady. Because you are good at physics, she said, and because you have learned painfully how dangerous meaning can be when it's weaponized. My throat tightened. Mira continued, voice quieter. Also because this lab will swallow you if you stay. You need a wider sky. Wider sky. The phrase struck me like a blessing. I nodded slowly. Okay. Mira's mouth twitched. Good. As I left, she added one last thing, almost casually, because Mira couldn't tolerate being tender for too long. And Dev, she said, keep your practice, but keep it clean. Don't recruit anyone. I laughed softly. I won't. Mira looked at me, eyes sharp. And don't recruit yourself, she added. I froze. Then I nodded, because she was right. 63. On my last morning in Bengaluru, I woke before dawn and sat in darkness. No devices, no logs, no protocols. Just my breath, my spine, my attention. The tone in my ear arrived like it always did. Thin, steady. I listened. And then, for the first time in months, something didn't happen. The tone didn't pull me. It was there, but the rope feeling didn't come. I felt a small panic, the insect immediately wanting the old certainty. Did I lose it? Did I break something? Is the door closed? I breathed. I listened without forcing. The tone remained, indifferent. But the current, the sense of being drawn inward, did not appear. I sat with that absence like a scientist sits with a null result. Then a thought rose, quiet and surprisingly kind. Maybe the rope was never the tone. My chest loosened. I stayed in the darkness, not chasing. And slowly, without drama, something else emerged. Not a sound, not an image. A stillness that felt like it was listening, not to anything in particular, just listening. Attention without an object. A kind of awake emptiness. The tower, perhaps, not as descent, but as release of the need to descend. The door not opening into spectacle, but into ordinary presence. I sat there, tears leaking quietly, not from grief, but from the strange relief of not needing my own experience to behave. When I opened my eyes, the room looked the same. The world hadn't changed, but something in me had. I reached for my notebook and wrote, Today the sound didn't pull, and I discovered that the real practice is not hearing. It is not clinging. Then beneath it, I wrote the line that felt like my grandfather's last laugh. The insect wants even emptiness to be a trophy. I closed the notebook, and I left for the airport. 64. Years later, because stories that involve attention never truly end, I found myself back in Hathras again, not as a student this time. As a man with premature grey at the temples and a passport full of stamps from meetings about standards that no one thanked you for until something went wrong. Rafiq was older, slower, but his eyes were the same. He greeted me with a smile that felt like an old door opening without effort. "You came back," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I needed a reset." Rafik chuckled softly. "Everyone does." He led me into the back room. The spiral drawing was still there, protected in a sleeve now. Beside it lay something new, a printed page with a QR code and a label. Canary Kit, local translation, Hindi. I stared. Rafik watched my face, amused. "You made your standards into scriptures," he teased gently. I laughed, half groaning. "Please don't say that." Rafik's eyes softened. "Don't worry," he said. "Here, people know the difference. They use what is useful. They ignore what is not." I sat down, suddenly tired. Rafik poured tea and sat across from me. "You look heavier," he said softly. "I am," I admitted. "The world found new ways to steal attention." Rafik nodded, unsurprised. "It always will," he said. "That's why practices exist, not to escape thieves, to stop being a thief to yourself." I stared at my tea. Then I took a breath and asked the question that had haunted me since I was 23. "Rafikji, do you think Tulsi Sahib was pointing to God in the smallest thing?" Rafik didn't answer quickly. He looked at the spiral drawing, then at me. Then he said softly, "I think he was pointing to the place where you stopped needing to point." I exhaled, something inside me loosening. Rafik continued, "If you insist on calling it God, fine. If you insist on calling it brain, fine. The danger is not the word. The danger is the one who uses the word to feel superior." The insect again, tiny, persistent. I smiled faintly. "I still hear the tone," I admitted. Rafik nodded. "And? And sometimes I don't," I said. "And that's okay now." Rafik's eyes warmed. "Good," he said. "Then you are learning the real sound." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Rafik smiled gently, and his answer was the most surprising thing he'd ever said to me. "The real sound," he said, "is the sound of your desire becoming quiet." I sat very still. Outside, Hathras hummed with ordinary life. Inside, in my ear, the tiny tone flickered faintly and then steadied. And for a moment, I understood why Tulsi Sahib's line had haunted me for decades, not because it hid a cosmic secret, but because it described the most intimate revolution a human can undergo. A tiny insect, attention, ego, self-loop, learning to stop crowning itself. And when it stops, the door opens, not to spectacle, to a freedom so simple it can't be sold. Rafik sipped his tea. "Devendra," he said, as if speaking to my grandfather through time, "you did good work." I felt tears rise unexpectedly. "Did I?" I whispered. Rafik nodded. "Yes," he said, "because you built traps for thieves without becoming one." I closed my eyes. The tone was there. The silence around it was deeper. And somewhere beyond both, a quiet listening remained, awake, ordinary, unclaimed, tiny as an insect, crowning nothing, creating everything. 65. I went back to Hathras in the season when the air is thin and the sky looks like it's been rinsed too many times. I told myself it was for rest. That was a lie. Rest is what you do when you believe the world won't eat you the moment you stop moving. I had spent too many years watching attention become currency, watching inner freedom become a subscription. So, no, I didn't come for rest. I came because some part of me still believed there was a final hinge hidden in Tulsi Sahib's line. A single mechanical truth that would settle everything like a well-posed equation. The insect in me wanted closure. Rafik met me at the library door with the same expression he always wore when I arrived carrying invisible storms. "You're back," he said. "Yes," I replied. He looked me over, older now, slower, but his eyes still sharp. "You look like a man who won a war and lost his sleep," he said. I smiled faintly, something like that. Rafik didn't ask about the wars. He never did. He just said, "Come," and led me into the back room. The spiral sketch, the tower inside the ear, rested in its sleeve like a quiet accusation. Beside it, the cloth-bound notebook lay open waiting, and on top of it, as if placed there deliberately while I was gone, was a thin strip of paper with handwriting I didn't recognize. Rafik touched it gently. "A visitor left this," he said. "A scholar. She comes sometimes. She heard you were coming." My stomach tightened. "A scholar of what?" Rafik's mouth twitched. "Words. Of course, the smallest battleground." I unfolded the strip. It was a single sentence in English, clean and careful. "You are trapped by a transitive verb." I stared. Rafik watched my face with quiet amusement. "Sit," he said. "She'll come." 66. She arrived an hour later, carrying a canvas bag full of notebooks and a calmness that made me immediately defensive. She introduced herself as Dr. Amina Qadri, a linguist who specialized in early modern North Indian devotional texts, Braj, Avadi, the messy borderlands where poetry becomes scripture by surviving translation. Her handshake was firm. Her eyes were kind. Her tone suggested she had spent her life talking to people who wanted words to be weapons. "You're Devendra," she said. "Yes." "I'm sorry for your loss," she added gently, and I understood she meant my grandfather. Everyone in these circles seemed to know him, as if he'd left fingerprints in the air. "Thank you," I said. She sat, opened her notebook, and looked at me over her glasses. "Rafik tells me you've been thinking about Tulsi Sahib's insect," she said. I flinched. Even here the word felt charged now, hijacked by corporate memos, optimization loops, and the sickening memory of Sana whispering they call it insect internally. "Yes," I said carefully. Amina nodded. "And you built an entire worldview around one English translation." I bristled. "I built—" She raised a hand, not unkindly. "I don't mean that as insult. We all do it. Words are handles. We grab the handle we're given." She leaned forward. "But sometimes the handle is wrong." Rafik watched us like a man watching two cats circle. Amina opened the cloth-bound notebook and tapped a line with her finger. "This line," she said, "the one you quoted." I could recite it from memory even now. "The soul hears a wave of sound and rhythm and opens the door, unspeakable, indescribable." Amina's gaze sharpened. "Tell me," she said, "who opens the door in that sentence?" "The soul," I said automatically. Amina smiled faintly. "That's what the English says." "Yes," I said, irritation rising. "Isn't that the point?" Amina's eyes softened in a way that disarmed me. "No," she said quietly. "That's the trap," Rafik murmured almost to himself. "Transitive." Amina nodded. "In English," she said, "you often need an agent. Someone must do the opening, someone must act. The sentence wants a subject that feels powerful." My throat tightened. Amina pointed to the older marginal note in the manuscript, faded, almost smudged. "In the original phrasing," she said, "the construction is closer to 'the soul hears and the door opens.'" I stared at her. "That's the same." "It's not," she said gently. I frowned. "It's just grammar." Amina's gaze held mine. "Exactly," she said. "Just grammar and just a universe." My skin prickled. She continued, voice quiet but precise. "The soul opens the door implies control, agency, achievement. It flatters the seeker. It makes the experience a conquest." I swallowed. "The door opens implies something else," she said. "A condition is met. A threshold is crossed. The opening happens when grasping stops." I felt my chest tighten as if someone had pressed a palm there. Amina leaned back slightly. "One word," she said softly. "One verb. One shift from transitive to intransitive." She smiled faintly, and it wasn't smug. It was almost sad. "You built your life trying to open a door," she said. I couldn't speak. Rafik's voice was gentle. "Now you see the door was never yours to open." I felt heat behind my eyes. The insect in me panicked, because this wasn't a new secret to own. It was the removal of ownership itself. I looked down at the page again. The old ink didn't glow. It didn't shout. It simply sat there, patient as stone. The door opens. Amina watched me carefully. "I'm not saying your experiences are false," she said. "I'm not saying your science is wrong. I'm saying the core of the poem is not an object you find. It's an event that happens when the seeker stops pretending to be the author. Author. My grandfather's voice returned. The greatest trap is the desire to be certain. Mira's voice. Keep it clean. Omar's voice. Don't become the face. Sana's whisper. I let them breathe for me. All of it suddenly reorganized around a single grammatical hinge. Not a new theory, a correction, a cleansing. I heard myself ask, too softly, so what is the crown jewel? Amina's eyes softened. You're still doing it, she said, almost lovingly. I blinked. She smiled faintly. The crown jewel is not a thing. It's the moment the door opens. Rafiq nodded slowly, satisfied, like a man watching a stubborn child finally stop chewing glass. Amina continued, if you want to keep the insect metaphor, fine. The insect is the tiny eye that wants credit. When the eye shrinks enough, the opening happens. The jewel is not what you seize, it's what you become capable of letting happen. I sat very still. In my ear, faintly, the thin tone was present, as it always was, but it didn't feel like rope-in. That moment. It felt like background. Like the sound was never the point. It was the condition. 67. I left the library that evening and walked without direction through streets that smelled of dust and frying oil and winter smoke. Hathras hummed around me, ordinary life at low frequency. Scooters coughed. Someone argued over vegetables. A dog barked at a shadow as if defending metaphysics. I found myself standing by a small open drain where water moved sluggishly, carrying bits of paper, bits of life. An insect crawled along the edge, real this time, not metaphorical. It stopped, its antennae moved. Then it continued. No drama, no crown, no story. I laughed softly, and it wasn't joy or despair, just recognition, because I saw it suddenly. My whole quest had been a struggle over agency. In physics, I wanted to open the Planck door by smashing things with larger machines or smarter mathematics. In meditation, I wanted to open the inner door by concentrating harder, being purer, being special. In activism, I wanted to open the world's eyes by building standards and detectors and audits. All of it, good work, real work, shadowed by the same hungry posture. I will open it. Continue. 68. The next morning I woke early and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote an email that felt like cutting off a limb and like removing a tumor. To the Attention Integrity Consortium, to Layla, to Mira, to Anaya. I'm stepping down from any public-facing role effective immediately. I'll continue technical contributions quietly. Please don't use my personal story in outreach. If asked, say, verification matters more than biography. I hovered over send. The insect screamed. You're abandoning the fight. You're shrinking. You're letting them win. Then, behind the scream, I heard the quieter truth. You're protecting the work from becoming a cult of personality. The door opens when the eye stops, insisting on being the handle. I pressed send. The relief was immediate and nauseating, like dropping a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. My phone buzzed almost instantly, a message from Anaya, proud of you, also furious, but mostly proud. A second message from Mira. Good, now you can work. A third from Omar. Finally. Welcome to the boring end of heroism. I smiled, and for the first time, boring felt like a sacred word. 69. That afternoon, I went back to the library to say goodbye to Rafiq and Amina. Rafiq poured tea as if tea were the answer to everything. Amina watched me over her cup. You look lighter, she said. I corrected a verb, I replied. Rafiq laughed, delighted. The best kind of correction. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been trying to reform itself in my throat all day. Do you think Tulsi Sahib knew what he was doing with that grammar? I asked. Or are we reading ourselves into it? Amina's eyes softened. Both, she said simply. That's how living texts work. They meet you where you are, but the danger is when you use them to crown yourself. I nodded slowly. Rafiq sipped tea and said almost casually, Devendra, your grandfather used to argue about this very verb. I froze. He did? Rafiq nodded. He was annoyed with translations that made the seeker heroic. He said, if you think you open the door, you will try to pry it open with your ego, and you will hurt yourself. My throat tightened. He left traps for me, I whispered. Rafiq's gaze softened. Yes. Because he loved you, and because he loved the truth more than your pride. I couldn't speak. Amina closed her notebook. Go, she said gently, and let your work be clean. I stood, bowed my head slightly in gratitude, and walked out into the winter afternoon. 70. On the train back, I watched fields slide past, pale under a washed-out sky. The ear tone was there, faint. Sometimes it rose, sometimes it blurred. It didn't matter. It was no longer my rope. Not because it was false, because the rope had moved deeper, from sound to the capacity to not cling. I thought of Sana learning to sit without devices. I thought of Mira choosing to take blame rather than let me become a symbol. I thought of Anaya building firewalls not to create enlightenment but to protect agency. I thought of my grandfather, quietly planting canaries to keep me from worshipping my own hallucinations. And I realized the ending I had been chasing for years, surprising, cosmic, undeniable, was never what the poem offered. The poem offered something harsher and more liberating. The door does not open because you are brilliant. The door opens because you become small enough to stop grabbing the handle. That's it. That's the scandal. That's why it can't be sold. Because it can't be owned. As the train rocked, I closed my eyes and let the world be what it was. Sound, vibration, inference, noise, attention, breath. Hundreds of thousands of universes built every second in the mind, and beneath them the tiniest hinge, not a particle, not a proof, a verb, opens.